We are Teri Potter and Catherine Borgman-Abeleda, and this is on Navigating the Abyss, Parenting Alchemy with Adolescents in Crisis. This is a podcast for parents like us who've struggled to find their way and support their kids. We're both conscious parenting coaches, certified by Dr. Shefali Sabari, and also trauma-informed within Dr. Gabon Mate and Sadda Ramkaur's approach of compassionate inquiry. Between us, as mothers of young people, we've dealt with a lot: depression and anxiety, gender identity exploration, high-risk behaviours spanning acute self-harm, substance misuse and addiction, eating disorders and suicidality, as well as our own personal trauma, as we've struggled to keep both ourselves and our families afloat throughout. So, whilst we always intend to hold these big topics sensitively, we feel it's important to mention up front that our podcast comes with a content warning and could potentially bring forward some emotional triggers for you. Our aim, though, is to shine a light by sharing alternative perspectives with you, some of our own insights, as well as concrete tools to help you accompany your young people and to tap into your own inner wisdom and find greater peace throughout this complicated journey. We hope you'll join us.
So welcome to our first episode. Through our common networks, Teri and I have found that the significant challenges that our daughters have faced have really had quite a bit of overlap. Likewise, we also found that our own personal experiences, our journey of accompanying our young people, were the catalyst for us to embark on similar paths to deepen our own self-awareness and wisdom. And we've both really felt called to share what we learned with other parents. So today will be the opportunity for Teri to share a bit about her journey with her daughter and what she's learned through the twists and turns of the last few years. And then the next episode, I will share a bit about my own experiences. We always do our best to hold these topics with intention and sincerity. If it seems too much right now, we hope you'll join us whenever you feel ready and able. So Teri, we'd love to hear your story. And if you maybe can please just start when you first realized you were in crisis with your daughter. What was going on? What were some of the warning signs? How you were feeling? Just a little bit of background, yeah.
Yeah, so thank you, Catherine. So I'm just going to begin by saying my daughter is now at the tender age of 17, and she really wants to share her story and our experiences so that it would help other people. And yet right now, her sense is that she would much rather not disclose too much explicit information. And so I'm going to handle this very gently, honoring that decision of hers. I will say that when she was aged 11, we were in a catastrophic situation. And needless to say, the whole family were in crisis. We were quite literally navigating the abyss at that point. And that was the before and after point, if you like, the time before these events occurred and the life that followed after. Nothing was ever quite the same again. But with hindsight, I fully acknowledge that I personally was in crisis for probably a good year preceding that, as we were tackling the bullies at my child's school. One person in particular was giving her a very, very difficult ride, and I was battling the school system, who were shutting down on us and really not being very helpful. So she had to exit the school system for the sake of her mental health. At around 12 years old, what happened to me was I just completely lost myself. I was left with no focus other than to keep my child alive. The warning signs now, as we talk about them, were, her coming home seriously unhappy and distressed and wanting to sort of punch the pillow and just cry and just, raging. And I had no idea where we would end up with this. And so I realized very quickly that I couldn't be around those huge emotions, those big feelings, without engaging in some kind of battle to fix the system, fix my kid. whatever help could be available, because I couldn't just sit and allow this to continue.
Yeah, I think often that's common, right? I mean, it's our first instinct is to fix and to rescue and use all the resources at our disposal to try and rescue our child from these unbelievable painful emotions and to fix the structure and the system that we feel is contributing to their struggle, right?
Was too awful. Well, had I known then what I know now, which is what she really needed was for me to just be alongside her, walk alongside her.
That seems like that was a big takeaway for you then, is that what she really needed at that time. And tell us a little bit about that, like what you now know that you wish you'd have known at the time when the crisis started.
What I wish I'd known back then was that it's okay to have big feelings. It's not something I grew up understanding. It wasn't my experience as a child. I was largely silenced or, dismissed out of hand if I had big feelings, be called either a drama queen or just left alone with them. So when I got an idea of that for myself and how that felt for me as a young child, I could then take a look at my daughter and realize actually what's going to make the biggest difference here is if she feels like it's okay, that she's okay to have these big feelings. I'm not looking at her as if she's broken or damaged, or I'm not trying to fix her. And she's confirmed that to me. We've gone on to have conversations around this. I said, what was the most challenging behavior I had around that time? And she said, it was you trying to make everything better.
And what did that look like to allow her to have those feelings? And I guess what I'm hearing too is for you to allow yourself.
To sit and be there with her was hard for me. So I began to realize, as I got into the work later, that to separate hers from mine was just the most important thing. I couldn't take it, but she was just expressing herself. So what does it look like? Well, what it began to look like as we began on a healing path was me walking around the house with my finger on my lips, largely. I just had a motto, which was just Teri, zip it. Just zip it. Because I got into Dr. Shefali's teachings, that was one of the key teaching points. And so I was all in because nothing else was working. So let's give this a go. And I could not believe the difference after being able to sit next to her on the sofa without an agenda. Oh my God, it was all going on inside though. I had so much, how are you today? And who have you, what's going on in your life? And can we just learn something new about this? I started to listen to my own expectations, and it was shocking how much I was, laying on her shoulders, the expectations and the ideals of, you need to get these exams, you need to get through school, you need to show up a certain way, you need to go to bed a certain time, there was always a list of things. I began sitting next to her and not speaking. She started talking to me.
You mentioned earlier around the importance that you found of separating yourself emotionally from her. Can you, and you're describing how you were doing that, it seems like such an important point. That was important for me as well. So can you tell us a bit more on what it took to do that? Because it's so difficult when your child is going through what your daughter went through.
It took a lot. I didn't just take on a teaching and then go, oh yeah, that's it. I'll do that now. No, it was really going through some processes, actually being able to put myself in her seat and see me coming, to have an experience of my own energy and how I showed up in her space, in her world, through her eyes. That was shocking to me. So I carried a whole load of expectation as I walked into the room, and she knew it, but it's not just about expectation. My judgments, my labels of her, I knew, you're not getting enough exercise, you're not seeing enough daylight, you don't have any friends, oh my God, are you going to hurt yourself in a minute? All of my fear. So we were hypervigilant for a very long time. There were a lot of things that we needed to do in order to keep her safe. We were walking on eggshells. The problem was we ended up in a repeating cycle. So I would be having this experience of the situation, and it was like on repeat, because every time she'd see me, she'd have an experience of herself through my eyes, which was like, oh my God, what are you going to do next? Are you safe? Are you okay? And to actually come to a point where I stopped asking her if she was okay, because every time I asked her if she was okay, she thought, you obviously don't think I am, I must be broken, there must be something wrong with me, and I'm causing you so much distress and anxiety. So I began to understand and read about codependency in enmeshment, and there was a ton of it. I'd given birth to a child and put on her shoulders a whole load of my fantasy for all of the life I hadn't lived the way that I'd wanted to live it. So yeah.
Yeah, which we all do as parents, right?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
we're told no one, I mean, that's pretty much the norm. We're not taught as parents to let our child's authentic self emerge. It's the we're taught to have expectations and to make sure that the child understands what it is
Right.
to be successful and have a successful life and what is the right way to be and to act and to show
Even
up.
even down to what we name them, right? We name them because we want them to go out into the world a certain way with this name and existing. But the name becomes so important. What was quite beautiful is my daughter, age 12, changed her name altogether. She didn't just change her name; she attempted to change her entire identity. And so, the message in there is very real. I am not yours. I am sovereign. I am my own spirit. So yeah, the biggest takeaway for me was coming to terms with the fact that this is not something that belongs to me, somebody that belongs to me, that I've created, that I'm molding, that I'm shaping. Not, oh, I've got a spirit, and this spirit has its own ideas, and they look nothing like mine.
Which is so hard because as mothers, our children are our projects, right? And they're, I think, much more so than fathers, they're a reflection of our ability to be a good mother. Their achievements and, if they're considered good and successful, directly reflect on, our value as a mother. So kind
Right.
of letting go in that and reframing it is so important, and it's not easy. And it's
It's not
interesting because
easy.
I think parents that don't have kids in crisis necessarily ever learn this.
Right. It's so
The
true.
majority of the world, they just, their kids end up following
Mm.
basically the path that's been laid out to them with, more or less their behavior doesn't require us to stop and really look at ourselves
Yeah.
deeply. And so in a way, it's so what you describe is so gut-wrenchingly difficult, the most difficult thing I think a mother could ever face.
And it's authentic.
On the top one or two, right? And in a way, it's a gift.
As my child was coming home and expressing herself, as challenging and traumatic as it was to witness, I saw the other children still in that setting. I just recall so many of those young people in sitting their exams in tears. I would hear about the parents whose kids were just, but they were showing up, they were being the good kids, they were doing all the things, and the parents were just still pushing them and still having that this is how it's got to go. And
Life is hard and you have to, right? Survival
right,
of the fittest and all of that.
everybody's got a breaking point, and you think, at what age? Okay, ours might have done it around around puberty, might have begun at this point, but at what point are those kids going to crash and burn? They might not be kids,
Yeah.
they might be adults, who knows.
Yeah. And there's a price to pay for this
Always
for kids, always at some point in their lives. Absolutely.
yeah.
So Teri, anything else? Tell us again, is there anything that key learnings or things that you wish you'd known that now you practice on a regular basis that really help you accompany your young person?
Yeah, there's something I would like to say to every parent out there as well, which is really, really important. We came to a critical point where nobody could help us. They couldn't help us because of the gravity and the seriousness of the situation. I guess it was just too high risk. No therapist wanted to come near. It was all too much. There weren't enough resources out there that could support us, and we didn't have any help. But what I want to say to every parent is that you are in the most unique position to help your child. And by attending to them, and being with them and walking alongside them, really the journey for us and I know that it's the same for you, Catherine, is be able to let go of those labels and judgments and actually be able to see our kids without all of our stuff in the way and our ideas and our fantasies, to actually step away from the institutions and the systems and think outside of the box and really just walk alongside our kids. We are the answer. We're in the most unique position. So that's the first thing I wanted to say.
Yeah, and I think what's key to what you're saying is that helping your child is actually helping yourself to start,
Yeah,
right? Because
absolutely.
that what you've discussed around separating your emotions and seeing your child for who she is and allowing her to express herself, even the most uncomfortable emotions, and to hold space for her requires you to do your work first.
It sounds like hard work, but the most wonderful experience I had was that it actually lifts so much responsibility off our shoulders. When we can acknowledge what is ours and what isn't, we can let go. And from there, we can find connection as your child finds it easier to come to you and actually see you and not just you looking at them. So that was a really important point.
Mm-hmm. And I just have to say, I love what you said about the freedom it brings you. I mean, I
Absolutely.
think the recognition that you are not responsible
Yeah,
for your child's journey.
right.
You're there, you can accompany them, but it is their path to walk.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
they have to know that, and you have to believe that.
Yeah. And when our children are bringing to us what we could never have imagined possible. Seeing our children suffering so much in the worst kind of pain, seeing that level of crisis, it puts our nervous systems into a state which for anybody is too much. It's just too much. And yet, understanding that there's room for us to step back and witness what's true, all the facts of what's actually happening, but also acknowledge what's going on in us in those moments isn't necessarily all about the present moment. For me, I had a lot of adverse childhood experiences. So there was a lot of unresolved trauma, a lot of wounds that were being triggered. When somebody in the room is having really big feelings and they're in crisis mode, well, I'm in fight, flight, freeze. I'm just shut down. So that's mine already. Bringing that into an already challenging situation just makes it all the more calamitous. And stepping out and having a sense of what's actually happening. So my child's not at school. Okay, is that the end of the world? Let's really think about, is that true? Is it really true? Does it really matter? None of it mattered. When we broke it all down, none of it mattered. Everything is now unfolding beautifully in its own time.
I think that's critical of, as you're saying, looking at the isness of the situation, as Dr. Shefali talks about a lot, is what is really going on, and what meaning are you making?
Yes. What are you making it mean?
What are you making it mean?
Yeah.
So much of it, as you said, has to do with your own stories.
Yeah. There's a lot
and
of
your own experiences and your own trauma. And your own expectations about what should be or what shouldn't be.
Definitely.
I know some of the moms I work with, and it's a discussion there's a lot of back and forth around, when to send the kids away and at what point. And I absolutely understand sending kids away when their life is at risk.
Right.
Because your first duty as a parent is to keep your child alive, right? But I think, the recognition of, how serious is this, and what does this really mean? And what part of this is actually just what my child is going through at the time. And I need to get through this with them. And it doesn't mean necessarily that their life is going to fall apart and that they're going to end up on the street. And
Yes.
That's all fear talking, right? That's all fear.
It's what are you making it mean? And then what would happen if that happened? And really drilling into it and actually coming to the answer at the end is like, oh, it's actually not that important. What's more important is that my child is okay. And I remember just sitting outside my child's door passing notes under the door when they couldn't talk. And when I began doing that and just sticking around without an agenda, without, and I wasn't asking if they were okay. I was just, want a hot chocolate? Do you want, everything began to shift. Began to shift because I was coming in clean. I wasn't coming in with any of these stories, I was just like, we are in this moment as it is right now. Tomorrow doesn't matter. Only this moment matters. And suddenly the clouds began to lift. We continue to have challenges, but the connection is real now.
That connection is critical more than anything else, is maintaining that connection. And we will, I mean, I know we'll be talking more about this in future episodes, but how to build that connection and maintain that connection and what that really looks like in different circumstances.
It is largely zipping it and listening. And I hear myself straight away. I go into that mode of, oh yeah, but there's always things that we have to say. There's always things that we have to sort out. They can't get away with blah, 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 blah. I would just say, just sit with yourself, sit with those questions, sit with that agenda and ask, is it true? Is it really true? Does it really matter? How much does it matter? What matters most?
Well, does it really matter? And even if it matters, is my saying it going to make a difference? Because I think sometimes as parents, we feel like we have these jewels of wisdom that must be imparted.
Yes.
But that's for us. It's like, it's not for them, right?
Yeah.
So, Teri, thank you so much for sharing this. And I just want to ask you one last question. What is it about your experience and your story that has brought you to want to share through this podcast? Why is this important for you?
This is important for me because when we reached that point of crisis where we suddenly really knew we were out of our depth, there was no help. There was no help available. I mean, everywhere we looked, I got very passionate about the idea of, coming out the other side of this and creating some kind of black book that any parent in crisis could look through. And I want us to do this podcast, and I want it to reach the people who it matters to the most, so that they can perhaps just get some of the tools that I didn't have at the time, we didn't have as a family at the time. The answer is there. There is an answer. And it's not on the outside. And I'm very pro therapy if it's right and you can find it and you get into the right space. But I'm also first and foremost, our kids need to be able to look at us and know that we're strong enough, and they need to know that they're not broken in our eyes. So yeah, to share these tools. Let's do it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Catherine. And your turn next. Okay, here's the legal stuff. This podcast is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes. We are not licensed therapists, and this podcast is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional. See you next time.